Testing, testing. Okay, I think we're good. All right, so we're back. This is day 3. HeroQuest fans with Chris Nato and Carmine answering more of my weird questions.
Hi guys, how are you?
Awesome, glad to have you. So there's a couple of questions left over from last time, but the main thing I wanted to talk about, is the Path of the Wandering Monk. And I think when this was first kind of teased, I mean, you like to tease us and we like to play along. Is this going to be like a Friar Tuck type character, or maybe is this going to be like a Shaolin fighting monk? And then that kind of raised some other questions, is like, what is the role of maybe the spirit or mysticism or religion? Is that something we got to skirt around in the world of HeroQuest? What was your whole approach or reaction to that?
No, so it was funny, when we were talking, you brought up holy water.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, holy water is a trigger for me. And
Okay.
you raised your eyebrows for a moment.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a lot of conversations we've had about the potential for cross-pollination between Dungeons & Dragons and HeroQuest, right? I think Monk resurfaced some of those comments where people are like, oh, well, they're just taking Dungeons & Dragons and just incorporating it into HeroQuest. And I had that in the back of my mind when we were talking about holy water, because I had some deep conversations with the team about what the kind of celestial powers of HeroQuest should be or could be in a world where we've departed from the synergy of the IP with things that were happening with Games Workshop. And I said, you know, if we're going to change chaos to dread, what is the real definition of dread, right? And our magic is based on the 4 elements. So I had started to build out a little bit of kind of the mystical levels and magical levels and religious levels or non-religious levels of HeroQuest in a brand Bible that I've been working on since I joined the team. And I looked at dread as this this kind of magical power of fear and hopelessness and loss that manifests through the war, the hate, the evil. And so when I did the first lore video, there was a really touching element that I did when I had the elf kind of kneeling down on one knee. She's holding a baby doll, and you can kind of see the kind of caravan kind of destroyed in the background. This feeling of like the sorrow of war, the sorrow of death. And then you see these kind of refugees kind of pan across the screen, and the wizard is got one hand on the dwarf, kind of consoling him. He kind of looks like he's about to like flip out on the idea that all these people are struggling in this war. It was a call to action that ended with the barbarian kind of over the field of battle, the like battlefield with a tree on the top of the hill. And that really turned into me kind of defining dread as the overwhelming negativity that comes with like fear and loss and death and war and evil and cruelty. And so I started to create the exact opposite and say, well, if the game is based on this idea of bringing the party together, uniting the heroes, and that we all make the jokes of like, you split the party, you lose the game, right? Then there is this fellowship, this camaraderie, this unity, this hope that is the counter to dread. That it's not about some god, you know, in the heavens, like bestowing upon you some power to make you righteous and just and true, but like the spirit of people coming together to stop evil and wickedness. and that there is something that manifests the counter to fear, that idea of hope. And I said, I love this idea because that is the high fives we give at the table when we win in a quest. We did it together, and we overcame evil. And so I was like, that to me is a unique element to what happens in HeroQuest. Why, just for the sake of marrying it up with the themes of high fantasy or other IPs that utilize things like clerics and priests and things like that, that we couldn't use the spirit of hope as that element. So that led to a lot of discussions where it's like, yeah, we could introduce a cleric that's a healer and have that archetype and that class, that playable character in the game. But I would rather find a better way to do it, that instead of it being a counter to an evil god, some good deity or something, that it's somehow in the spirit of the people who rise up to become heroes in HeroQuest. And that led me down a path of, I don't think, maybe religion isn't a thing in HeroQuest. Maybe that's what makes it unique. Maybe it's this other thing, this intangible of this concept of hope that becomes that thing. And how do we define that? How do we build on that? And so that's why holy water to me is a thing. And we talked through it a few times, and it was like, maybe it's almost like the snake oil. Like, they call it holy water. They talk about gods, but there really aren't any, you know. And the same is true of Dread. And I think if you no spoilers or spoiler alert, dramatic pause, like, what is Dread really potentially becomes something that starts to Easter egg in Rise of the Dread movie. You know, is it not dark gods from a parallel dimension, but something else, something that manifests very differently, that doesn't have the sentience of powers of the Immaterium or something like that. Starts to become something we can own and define as a community that makes HeroQuest separate from those things. So for people who are out there assuming we're just taking one IP from one side of the hallway and smashing it into another, it's actually quite the opposite that's actually occurring.
Very interesting, and I just need to pause it here. All right, Gen Con, day 3, we're talking with Chris Nadeau, aka N. Carmine at Avalon Hill, and we're talking about some really interesting concepts in the development of the Path of the Wandering Monk. And Chris's, or would you say this is the whole team's vision, or this is kind of like your personal headcanon of it?
Well, it's kind of like functioning as like the franchise creative lead. It kind of gives me the chance to provide a vision, and the team kind of rallies around those visions to build on them and challenge them and grow them out and expand them. So it makes for a good team exercise to think through these things, and provides a lot of opportunity for unique and innovative thinking.
So I have so many questions. So let me boil it down and see if I'm understanding what you're saying. So the way you view like mysticism or the definition of dread, all these ideas within the HeroQuest world that you're creating as we speak is maybe less, it's not the Games Workshop system transposed where you have like evil gods or good gods, maybe like warp space with radiation coming out influencing people's powers. It's not Star Wars where you've got like the light side or the dark side, but it's like hope and fear and kind of the emotions coming through, and it's the power that manifests through that.
I have a diagram in the Brand Bible that has kind of dread on one extreme side of the diagram and hope on the other. And in the middle, I put the 4 elements based on the magical spell powers of the game. And I said, if you think of the 4 elements as completely neutral, almost like children, that in their manifestations across our world, they kind of are constantly kind of squabbling and fighting, but not necessarily over nefarious or good intentions. but for the raw kind of aspects of who they are and what they do. And that creates the balance in the world. So you might have something like fire that creates a volcanic event on an island, but water perishes the volatility of the fire, and land is thus made. Or earth is absolute except when it is eroded by water, and so they have these balances to each other. What Dread does is it messes up the balance. It creates the pandemonium that kind of erodes the natural cycle of the world, right? So what's left behind is uninhabitable. It is too tumultuous. So this beautiful island that we're describing, if through eons and ages, it slowly becomes land, and creatures thrive on that island, and flora grows on that island, and then we introduce Dread through the usage of Dread magic. Does it become nothing but tumultuous hurricanes and thunder and lightning and damaging winds, and so it becomes uninhabitable. The land starts falling apart, and that becomes perhaps Mentor's warning to Zargon when Zargon falls and delves into the Dread magic. If you use this stuff, yes, it might give you power, a power that you're not accustomed to, that breaks the bonds of the natural order, but with it, it leaves like a residue, a residual effect. Use it too much, and you will unravel our world. And that begins to start to paint a picture of why Mentor is so concerned about Zargon going unabated through existence, why he has to be stopped, because of it. Essentially, it could just unmake reality. And again, this gives us an opportunity for some storytelling that isn't necessarily your generic high fantasy, or high fantasy that you are perhaps used to, right?
That's neat. So I'm thinking so Zargon invented the bomb, basically. He split the atom. He wasn't supposed to.
Say that again.
He invented the atomic bomb. He split the atom.
It's sort of, exactly. It's a little bit of that thinking that he is unabashful and unapologetic about the effect his actions are having on the world around him, and what that's doing for personal greed and power. And again, that paints a little bit of a different picture for us.
It's really interesting. But I'm gonna challenge you, and I'm sure other people will too, is at the same time you're saying all this, it sounds really interesting, but Holy Water's still in the game. It still does something.
I know, and that's just it. Is the deeper definition of that something that we can still embrace some baseline elements like Holy Water, but find a good narrative or reason for being, right? That's some deeper conversations that I've had with the team. Can things like that exist? But how they work, how they're made, what they're made of, are those things just explainable in other terms? Are there plants that have the ability, once brewed a certain way, to kind of reweave existence, right? They have a healing effect in that capacity, and the people of the realm call it Holy Water, but it's an herbal element that's brewed a certain way to create an effect,
I know it's not the same, just like you're not trying to copy Dungeons and Dragons, you're not trying to copy Games Workshop, you're not trying to copy Tolkien either. But I was thinking, I'm rereading The Lord of the Rings now after forever, and the lore of the elves is kind of like, to everyone else it's magic, but to them it's just natural science or philosophy or the power of the mind or something. Because I was going to come back at you and say, well, all this elemental stuff is really cool, but then you've got the Mage of the Mirror where you've got like time magic or mind magic or I guess nature magic, but it doesn't quite line up exactly with what we're talking about.
And that's why none of this has been something I've documented forward to the players and the community, because it's something that's still brewing. It's wet cement, right? It's something to think about for how we want to grow and expand and define it. And it's also something that I'm reluctant to put in stone, because again, we talked earlier about this idea of like a sandbox to let people make it what they want. Does that go too far in making it a very linear, prescriptive story that makes it harder to homebrew your own roleplay? And so that's why it becomes almost my own notebook. You guys make all the comments about old dwarf quests and Stephen Baker notebooks, and so what you're hearing is you're hearing a little bit of Chris's notebook right now and what that tends to look like, and where I've made notes and ended them with question marks to think further about. But I brought it up with you, Kurgan, the other day because I listen to the feedback, I hear the comments, I read the comments, I go on the Discords, I peruse all the Facebook groups, watch all the videos, and I hear it, and I see those comments about where are they taking something like Monk? What was the inspiration? Is it being derived from something that's, being handed down or waterfalled to Avalon Hill from another source in Hasbro or something like that? And that's what kind of prompted this conversation. It's actually like it kind of boils up more or less from the Avalon Hill team, becomes a lot of food for thought, and a team that's empowered to have these conversations and think about these things. And you're kind of getting a little bit of a behind the curtain how those conversations are going and what those notebooks look like and where my headspace is and where my brain is going. But again, we haven't put much of that to paper on purpose at the moment, right?
Well, I eat that stuff up, and there's other people out there that eat that up too. See, I thought you were going to go in a totally different direction. I was thinking, okay, this is Hero Quest, it's for the masses, it's for everyone. We don't want to tread on anyone's toes. Because I'm thinking, religious belief is so personal to people. You're going to have some people that'll say, listen, I don't believe in this religion, you can't put it in the game, even though it's fantasy. So if you're a Christian, it's like, that's the true faith, If you put Christianity in Hero Quest, it's like, wait a minute, is this going to be like the version I believe, or a fantasy version of it, or we'll just leave it out and we'll assume it's there, but it won't be part of the game, You don't have God's favor when you're doing this attack, or if it's, I think Dungeons & Dragons tends to be more of like a polytheistic world. So it's like, okay, you've got these different patron gods, but they're not from history, from Earth's history. They're made up.
I'd be lying to say that those conversations don't happen, and it's not stuff that I don't think about. But again, like this thread of idea started when I was beat cheating that first lore video. And that beat cheating the first lore video,
yeah.
Right? So you write like something before you even write your first draft or your first script. It's almost like the key beats of a story. So when I did that, and Patrick and I had the first conversation about the lore video, it's like we wanted it to be a call to action. We wanted that like real like base level, like unite the heroes, rise up and challenge the Argonne moment. And as I was doing it, I started to define those two frames in particular of the elf and the dwarf and the wizard. Like, I kind of had a pause moment. It was like, but why? Like, what does this mean? Why is this important? Why would picking up my axe or picking up my sword carry more meaning than just the will to fight? Like, what does that create? What kind of energy does that create? And that started that thinking. And I sat there at one point with the backs of the 4 cards from the base game just looking at the 4 elements, thinking through this idea of dread. What does that mean? Because we had to make that decision for reasons, and what was missing in that infographic in my head started to create an idea, and it's just I guess part of the world building process at the end of the day, right?
Well, and I was thinking how tough you have it, because you've inherited this whole thing and you're free to kind of play with it, but you're also trying to, like, for lack of a better term, give the fans what they want, but then also be creative and forge your own path forward. I suppose someone could say, I want to have my deities and prayers and whatever in the game, so I'm just going to put them in there, and
then
that's
again,
fine.
that's why none of this is prescribed. If somebody wants that, go for it. Like, that's the sandbox we were talking about, right? That's the homebrew, the house rules, the light role play, the make it ours. Of course. I mean, that's kind of the DNA of HeroQuest.
Or someone else could say, well, phew, we're going to stay away from those topics that...
And they can, exactly that. And in a way, because I've, to date, kind of avoided defining it through things like a priest character or a cleric or things like that, there's, right now, not much that's hopefully making that an uncomfortable decision.
At the same time, again, I'm going to push forward. In the Spirit Queen's Torment, they talk about the gods. They don't say who or what they are, so I guess your imagination can fill in the details. There are ghosts. We've always had ghosts, spirits. Of course, again, what are they in this universe? Could be a lot of things. There's demons. Again, what are demons? Are they physical beings? Are they spiritual? Are they aliens from another dimension? Who's to say? So Spirit Queen's Torment has that. There's Uller's Ghost in the game system. I think there's... What am I trying to think of? Oh, there's something else. The Dave Morris novels. There's a couple of little...
Yeah, I would not
bits.
Probably consider Dave's stuff canon anymore. Again, because that precedes the reissue of the game, I would not necessarily look at that as canon at this point.
Okay, so the Dave Morris novel is not coming back.
Probably not in the iteration that it probably exists in publication today.
HeroQuest Infinities. What if stories? I know, you can't say it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I was thinking of Dave Morris's, he doesn't really name anything, but he does talk about the barbarian, like, he doesn't, like, worship the gods, but he doesn't want to piss them off either. And there's a crucifix, there's holy water, and then there's crossing oneself, but what does that mean? They don't go into detail, it's just details. But if it's not canon, I suppose.
Yeah, I would not consider any of that canon at this point. I would say everything that precedes the reissue at the crowdfunding for the HasLab is all open for, I don't know, I guess it's open for, if that was sacred to you as a player, again, make it yours, own it. But if your expectation is that that's just going to get reissued as is without any thought or application of scrutiny to make it relevant to the new edition of the game, then...
Well, I know that when I asked you about Against the Ogre Horde, you had no idea what I was talking about.
I still have no idea what you're talking about.
But let's say there was something like that, it might not be the same thing that we imagined it to be from the past. It might not be just a reissue.
I would think you would have learned something from Age of the Mirror.
Ah, yes.
I think we did a great job scoping and scaling Frozen Horror to a price point and a size that made a lot of sense for fans of the game. And so when we produced Mage, the original componentry didn't quite match up with the scale and size of Frozen Horror. So it was part of the decision process of what can we incorporate into Mage that will make the two offerings feel of equal value. Now take that and apply Ogre Horde and Wizards of Morkar. Neither one of them is up to Frozen Horror standard. What does that mean?
Smaller box, cheaper price.
Are they? Well, you could scale them to Keller's Keep and Witchlore, very much so. Or you could scale them to Mage and Rise and Frozen Horror. Or they could even be something else.
So rather than just cramming them, see, we're just thinking of it in, okay, you either cram it into one box, you split it into two boxes, but as far as extras or expansions or new wrinkles or bonus features, we have no idea what you're planning.
Is it weird that Ogre Horde has 7 quests? Is it weird that Morkar has 5? Like,
that's 12 quests.
Or it's two items that need to scale to 10.
That was one of the questions. But we're talking in the realm of speculative hypothesis.
Yeah, very much so.
Very good, very good. Well, let me just go back through a couple of quick things. So, again, we have many characters in our community who are looking to complete their collection, so to speak, or close the circle, or finish the dotted line into a nice straight line. So Hasington asks, are we going to have the alternate gender sculpts of the extra heroes? Like, are we going to get a male warlock, a female bard, a male druid?
Well, I will say the gender swaps that were in the original crowdfunding campaign, those were not marked as exclusive to the crowdfunding.
And I'm sure you've probably noticed that they're still in the app and people can still play and enjoy them. So are you watching to see how popular they are for a future re-release?
I don't even think we need to collect that data. I think the idea of gender diversity and inclusion is matter of fact and essential and relevant, and I would not, that would be the last thing that I would put barriers up around. Right? If I could do all of it now, I would. Patience, time. You see the efforts we make when we do commanders and rogues and monks and everything else. It's very much an essential element of our thinking, right?
Well, I mean, I was thinking, well, where's the female Yeti? But at the same time, how do I know what the male and female look like? I mean, maybe under all that fur, who knows, right?
Actually, that's a super funny comment. If you're familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, the Yawning Portal, there are 60 cards in the deck. Every one of them is a unique character from Dungeons & Dragons. They range a very diverse group of different species across the entire kind of spectrum of D&D. And every one of them has both the male and female gender attached to them. And it was a very fun exercise with the Wizards team to define some of them that maybe didn't have quite the definition prior. So, like, what does a female kobold look like becomes a thing. That was a lot of fun to figure out with the
even
team.
uglier than the male version. I don't know.
So there's some really fun art in that game because the teams had to get together and answer some really difficult questions, especially when some of the fantasy species are based on, real world, derivatives like lizard, and how do you define female lizard?
Oh yeah, you can't quite tell. Well, I shouldn't say this because I'm not a D&D player, but I'm picturing like a gelatinous cube and then a gelatinous cube with like a pink bow in its hair.
So there was just a lot of really interesting conversations that were a lot of fun. It's one of those moments where it's like, as a member of this team, you're like, oh my god, am I actually getting paid to have this conversation?
Well, if it matters to the fans, I guess that's the... Because when we were kids, like we had no problem just saying, okay, this figure can be, you can imagine, whatever you can imagine is what it is. Because otherwise you're going to get out your paints every time and like, okay, now I got to repaint him because he's got black hair instead of, green hair or whatever. But at the same time, like my little niece, like when she sees the girl character, she goes right for that sculpt.
Of course. I think that's part of the fun, especially with what we're doing on Evelyn Hill. We want people to find an emotional connection with something in the game that's going to provide value to them. That's why everything we're doing, from Betrayal to Your Own Portal to HeroQuest to Risk Shadow Forces, like all of it has as much diversity as we can infuse into it to like really broaden that outreach so that everybody finds something within it. That's important to us.
Yeah, and I feel like there's never going to be enough of that, but that's when the fans take the next step.
I know. I mean, it's tough because you got so many other factors. How many miniatures can you put in the box and cost out? How many players is the game, right? All of those things become like barriers to like, or different parts of the graphic equalizer to figure out. But it's always part of the process to be like how far-reaching, how broad, how wide a net can we cast for the community so that everybody feels like they can find themselves in our games.
I'm sure you've heard this before, but with the new Guardian Knight and Rise of the Dreadmoon, there's some people that are glad. They're like, oh, finally, we get this cool knight, and you could just imagine
It was a super easy decision, right? We were like, put a helmet on.
Right.
And
but then you got people that's like, yeah, but I wanted two. So you buy a second copy, right?
Again, you'll to your earlier point, there'll always be somebody who feels like, we've partially failed them in some way. But I mean, it all comes from the good intentions of doing right by the fans and listening and engaging with you guys, and that's why we're sitting down talking. That's important to us. We'll just keep working at it.
And we really appreciate it too. I was just noticing you have a pin on there that says HeroScape on it.
I do. I am a huge supporter on what's happening. That was ultimately last year at this time at Gen Con, my promise to everybody I talked to at the booth was, we're bringing HeroScape back. Who's pushing the pencil, how it's coming back, when it's coming back, what logo's on the bottom of the box, stuff's not important. What's important is bringing HeroScape back to the fans, and we are doing that. And so I am thrilled that we've been able to still figure this out. And I know after the Age of Annihilation didn't fund, people were like, oh, here we go. Are they ever going to release it?
Gotta wait another 20, 30 years.
Yep. But what we don't share, or the community doesn't have insights into, is the next day we were right back into the meetings of, okay, what's the plan? How are we doing this? Let's figure it out. Put our heads together. It wasn't we give up and on to the next thing. It was, let's follow through, honor our commitment, work at this. It wasn't easy. It was a lot of conversation, a lot of difficult conversation. But ultimately, I think we found a great solution. Renegade's an awesome partner. They're good people. They work really, really hard. And I'm excited to see it all come to fruition.
So do you think if I wandered over there to Renegade and started just grilling them, they'd send me away?
I have no idea. I have no idea what their PR plan is over at that booth. In fact, I feel like I haven't had a chance to even walk the exhibitor hall yet.
I think I'm going to try it because they did put out that press release, so they should anticipate questions.
I think they should too. I mean, and
those colorful cards are pretty colorful.
I'm sure they're prepared for it. I mean, they're putting out pins, they're putting out press releases, they're engaging the community on their Discord. I'm sure they've got some talking points. I'm sure that the plan is starting to ramp up in that capacity, but I think fans should be excited.
I'm excited. You know, and originally I was just excited for the HeroScape fans because I thought they need to be vindicated here. You know, the ones who supported the HasLab campaign. But I've snagged my own like used copy, and I haven't played it yet, but I want to. And I'm kind of like already thinking, before I've even learned the game, how to like mod in like HeroQuest characters in HeroScape and vice versa, and getting Warhammer in there, and because it seems like you can do so much. I think there is am I correct that there's like a similar spirit of customization and modification in HeroScape that they're going to carry forward?
I think what made HeroScape the game it is today is that when HeroScape went away, the fans didn't. And they continued to support that game, run tournaments all over the world, and that created an entire community of modders, homebrewers.
Sounds familiar. Sounds like something I can relate to.
It does, and I think that generated a lot of unique units, some house rules, some kind of quiet FAQs that helped smooth out some wrinkles in the gameplay. But how that's going to go going forward, and at what degree and what formal capacity, who knows? But I think the HeroScapers community and all the modding crew out there, I mean, just keep doing what they're doing, you know?
I'll have to ask them if they have a secret deal yet with Mattel.
With Mattel?
Well, they're producing all these little miniatures from movies and cartoons that are almost the right size to be units.
I think everybody's creating something that's either 28 or 32 heroic at this point.
That's true.
Again, I don't even have to walk through that exhibit hall to tell you that.
But I mean, these are pre-painted, they're already pre-based. I mean, it's almost perfect. You just need stats, a little stat card.
I'm sure somebody will mod that within minutes. In fact, if you want to talk HeroScape, I know just the person who's standing behind you right now who could probably answer all your HeroScape questions.
Craig Van Ness, ladies and gentlemen. He seems like a really nice, approachable guy, too.
Craig's awesome. He's one of my game designers on my team. It was hard not to get on my knees and beg Craig to come rejoin Hasbro, and you know, he's my pragmatist. He's my mentor in a lot of ways, and Craig's awesome. I super appreciate him on my team.
Excellent. Well, let me just veer into a couple more questions. I'll let you get back. I know there's tons of people here today. So Oatmeal Lumps says, any thoughts on a second board? Maybe for an overworked scene, or we'll just use tiles for that. Oh, and then he's asking about Battle Masters. I think we already talked about Battle Masters, but what about this idea? I mean, I know my reaction to it is to say, well, the board is all you need, but with each of these expansions, there's a tile pack. You're adding tiles to kind of expand it more. What do you think of that? People make their custom boards.
We actually have talked about unique thematic boards based on setting. That's been a conversation. We've definitely talked that through.
Like an icy board or a lava board.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Dragon Strike, the old TSR board game. Is that controlled by Wizards of the Coast now? Is that in the Hasbro vaults? Who controls that?
I don't think I've done the research to have a definitive answer on that. I don't think that's come up much in conversation, honestly.
Okay. Because I'm not as familiar with that game. I never owned it. I've just read, and I have a couple of the miniatures. But that board has a big outdoor area. I think on one side you flip it over, and it's a castle on the other.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Okay. I suppose maybe this is for Patrick, or maybe he can't say it. I mean, I asked him a lot of questions in the interview, and he was super engaged and interesting. But can you tell us anything about the sales figures of HeroQuest? Like how many millions of units sold or anything like that?
That would be a Patrick question, and I don't even know if Patrick can answer it. I'm not sure where and how we provide that information, especially being a publicly traded company.
Okay, so maybe not a question for you guys. That's fine. Moving forward with the different expansions, the ones that are announced and the ones that are just speculated to exist, maybe in the future, are you still thinking about maybe you've got like the smaller box, it's like $35, and the bigger box is like $45, and then maybe the individual hero collection like $16? Is that moving forward going to be what it is, or just kind of anything?
So I, at the moment, really like our structure of the hero collection, the kind of Keller's Keep Witchlord scale, and the Frozen Horror Mage of the Mirror Rise scale. I think that's a good formula. As far as actual price points, Hasbro actually doesn't define the price points. Right? That's not how the manufacturing, distribution, retailer relationship works. The retailers actually choose their pricing. We might give a suggested retail price based on, what it's costing us to make the product, but ultimately the retailers can decide their price on their own. That's how the system works.
Yeah, I've just started to learn little bits of that, because I think there was one store that was selling it for more than you guys were selling it through Hasbro Pulse, the Rise of the Dread Moon. But then they had like an in-store discount that brought it back down to that price again.
And that's just it. They need that flexibility in their own business to be able to do those things.
Yeah.
And that's why there isn't like a dictated pricing structure. That's not a thing.
We will not be undersold. Okay, so another question that I was advised to ask you, which I'm kind of curious about myself. I know we don't have our companion app people here, but the idea of this animal companion, what if the animal companion was like a hero that you could take into other quests? Has that ever been considered?
I'll table that one for future conversation.
Okay, and what about, so even just looking at, I think this was my question, when are we going to get a quest remix button in the companion app? Like you replay a quest and it re-synchronizes it with the AI or something? Or is that asking way more than what you guys are able to do?
No, I mean, we've had a lot of what-ifs on the companion app, and we've structured that companion app hypothetically in a lot of different ways for the future. That's all TBD. There's no like locked-in trajectory for how we want to handle that app. And to the question you brought up earlier in the week of the survey, right?
Yeah.
I think the fans are probably going to drive that app a little bit.
I'm going to tell everyone in the Discord to get on the
That's fine.
survey.
Go for it. Do it. Do it. It's going to matter. So.
All right, cool. Okay, I think I already asked you about the Dwarf and Wizard packs. We still don't know. Let's say you did do a Wizard and Dwarf quest pack in the future. Would it follow a similar trajectory as we've seen in the Frozen Horror Mage of the Mirror, like with the alternate gender Dwarf, alternate gender Wizard?
I'd say
solo quest.
Understand that Rise of the Dread Moon is based heavily on consumer feedback, right? A lot of the decisions that drove Rise were based on us collecting the feedback since we started, right? We hit a critical mass point where it was like, all right, stop the reissue cycle. Let's address some of the feedback. Let's give them what they're asking for. And then we can get back potentially on those rails of reissue, or continue to supply newness based on feedback. That will not stop. So if we get into a situation where feedback is driving a decision as part of one of those or something else, it's going to affect it in that way. So I wouldn't look at it as like a formula anymore, so much as like a recipe based on the ingredients that you want to put in it. That might mean there's never a formula. You're always kind of homebrewing your soup, right? They're asking for this. Fine, let's put it in. Let's do that. Then a year later, they want something else, and we're like, fine, throw out that other thing, and let's do this new thing they're asking for. That's just us trying trying to react to the community.
I feel like I've asked you this before, but maybe I just dreamed it. What is stopping Rogar's Hall from going into the companion app?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, so it's not a technical issue. And I kind of feel weird asking it because I feel like I was one of the people that kind of like complained about it, and I thought, what? This is the great Stephen Baker, really? And then, of course, he totally blew me away with Prophecy of Telor, but at the time I was thinking, I don't know, this doesn't quite seem like a training quest. This seems like you're just punishing the players. And they might take it well, but they might not.
Well, again, it's not a very good intro, is it? You know,
it's more for like you've been away from the game for 30 years and you want to just relive some of that magic of, because you know you've kept your character for so long, you're just unbeatable. And it's like, no, you're going to be humbled this time.
Maybe. I'll have to ask Doug if he has an opinion on that.
But I guess I kind of get swooped up in the nostalgia, the collector mentality of like everything that's ever been written has to come out. Like I want the maze, I want, you know, White Dwarf, I want all these things. I want Dave Morris reprinting his novels, you know.
Yeah, Dark Company, random Japanese quests.
Ah, yes. Oh, that was the example I didn't think of before in the religion talk. So Grimdead is the Japanese Zargon or Morcar, maybe. And he's trying to resurrect some evil god. Now, they don't really define what that is. Is this sort of like the Japanese idea of like the kami, or I think that's the right term, or like a spirit of a place or a person or a celestial figure, not necessarily an almighty deity. And I guess in a sense it's kind of like you're fighting the Witch Lord or the Frozen Horror, this very powerful creature, but it's not unstoppable, and you come together with your, you know, magical artifacts and you triumph. But I mean, that's something that's out there, and I suppose your answer before was that's not necessarily canon yet, but who knows? Maybe it might inspire something later.
Yeah, I mean, the bomb I'll drop at you to kind of end the interview is, who is Morcar? Who is Zargon? Right? Everybody's got their speculations. How does Mentor play into that? Is it an alias? Is it a different person? Are they the same person? Is it Fight Club? Right? And again, that's one of those things that the community has hypothesized, speculated, provided their own perspectives on for 40 years. It'll be so much fun to drop that bomb on you guys.
Oh man. Well, thank you, Chris. Chris Nato, ladies and gentlemen, HeroQuest fans. All right, we're going to let him get back to work, and I think we're going to wander around some more and figure out what else we can learn. So thanks for listening.